Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Not the peaceful early morning quiet she'd grown to love before the city woke up. This was different. This silence had weight. It pressed against her chest the way bad news does before it arrives, like the world pausing to catch its breath. The phone lay face down on the kitchen counter, vibrating softly, insistently, as if it already knew she was afraid to turn it over. For years, Kelly had mastered the art of composure, smiling through live television, navigating headlines, balancing humor with heart. She was good at that. Very good. But nothing prepares you for the moment when the universe decides to knock the air out of your lungs in your own kitchen, with the coffee still brewing and the sun barely up. She flipped the phone over. 7 missed calls. 3 voicemails, all from the same number. "Mark," she whispered. Her hands shook as she pressed play. "Kel, it's me. Call me back, please. Something's wrong." The message cut off abruptly, followed by the hollow click of a call ending too soon. Kelly sank into the chair, heart hammering. Mark didn't panic. In 25 years of marriage, she could count on one hand the times he'd sounded anything like this. Mark was steady. Mark was calm. Mark was the one who grounded her when life spun too fast. If Mark sounded scared, it meant one thing. They all were. The emergency unfolded like a nightmare stitched together from fragments, rushed conversations, half-formed explanations, sirens wailing in the background of phone calls. Their youngest had collapsed unexpectedly during a routine college activity. No warning, no prior signs. 1 minute laughing, the next minute on the ground, unresponsive. Kelly barely remembered grabbing her coat. The drive to the hospital passed in blurs of red lights and unanswered questions. Her mind replayed memories she hadn't visited in years. First steps, scraped knees, bedtime stories, the smell of shampoo after bath time. A mother's brain does that. It gathers everything precious and lines it up like soldiers, as if love itself might be armor. By the time she reached the emergency room, the word terrified felt too small. Hospitals have a particular smell, a mixture of antiseptic and fear. Kelly had walked these halls before, but never like this. Never with her heart in her throat and her future hanging in the balance. Mark was pacing when she found him. His eyes were red, his jaw clenched in that way that meant he was holding himself together by sheer will. "She's stable," he said quickly, before she could even speak. "They're running tests. They don't know what caused it yet." Kelly nodded, though her knees threatened to give out. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of his breathing and the steady thump of his heart. "I was so scared," she whispered. "So was I," he admitted. They sat in plastic chairs under fluorescent lights for hours that felt like years. Doctors came and went, speaking in cautious phrases and clinical tones. Unusual, we're monitoring, too early to say. Kelly wanted to scream. She wanted certainty, or at least something solid enough to hold on to. Instead, she held her husband's hand and counted breaths. At some point, she realized her phone was buzzing nonstop. Texts, calls, notifications. The outside world had noticed her absence. Kelly Ripa had spent decades sharing pieces of her life with millions. Morning routines, family jokes, honest confessions about motherhood and marriage. Her audience felt like extended family in a way. Warm, familiar, well-meaning. A producer left a gentle voicemail, checking in. A co-host texted a heart emoji, followed by, "Take all the time you need." News outlets speculated quietly at first, then louder, filling the silence with guesses. Kelly turned the phone face down again. For once, she didn't know how to talk about it. The night stretched on,
Machines beeped rhythmically in the room where their child lay sleeping, wires tracing delicate paths across skin Kelly had kissed 1,000 times. The doctors finally spoke with more clarity. A rare reaction, possibly stress-induced, possibly genetic, something that might never happen again, or might. No guarantees. Kelly sat by the bed, watching each rise and fall of her child's chest. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and felt the familiar ache of loving someone more than your own life. "We were terrified," she would later say, but the truth was deeper than fear. It was helplessness, the kind that strips you down to your core and reminds you that no amount of success, fame, or preparation can protect what matters most. At 3:17 a.m., her child opened her eyes. "Mom?" she whispered. Kelly broke. She laughed and cried at the same time, pressing a kiss to her forehead, careful of the wires. "I'm here. I'm right here." The days that followed were quiet in a different way, healing quiet. Doctors' instructions, follow-up appointments, the slow return of color to tired faces. Kelly stayed off television longer than she ever had. She cooked meals, sat on the couch with her family, listened more than she spoke. The world outside continued spinning, but inside their home, time moved gently. Still, she knew she couldn't stay silent forever. People were worried, people cared, and Kelly had always believed that honesty, real honesty, was a bridge, not a burden. When she finally returned to the studio, the applause felt softer than usual, warmer, like a collective hug. She took her seat, adjusted her microphone, and looked out at the audience. For a moment, the familiar lights felt foreign. Her voice caught when she spoke. "I want to thank everyone," she began, choosing each word carefully, "for the messages, the prayers, the kindness. Our family went through something incredibly scary." The studio fell silent. "There was a moment," she continued, "when we didn't know what was going to happen, and in that moment, everything else disappeared. Jobs, schedules, headlines, it all meant nothing." She paused, inhaling deeply. "We were terrified, but we were also reminded of how fragile and precious life is, how quickly everything can change." Kelly didn't share details. She didn't need to. The truth lived in her eyes, in the way her hand trembled slightly on the desk. "Our child is okay," she said, smiling through tears, "and we are so, so grateful." The audience exhaled together. After the show, Kelly sat alone in her dressing room longer than usual. She stared at her reflection, noticing lines she hadn't paid attention to before. Not flaws, evidence, proof of years lived, laughter earned, worries carried. Fear changes you. It doesn't always make you weaker. Sometimes it sharpens your sense of what matters. That night, back at home, the family gathered around the dinner table. Nothing fancy, pasta, too much garlic, laughter that felt a little louder than normal. "Mom," her child said suddenly, twirling a fork, "you don't have to worry so much." Kelly smiled softly. "That's not how it works." "I know," she said, grinning, "but I'm okay." Kelly reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I know, but loving you means I'll always be a little scared." Mark raised his glass. "To being scared," he said, "and to being grateful anyway." They clinked glasses. Later, lying in bed, Kelly thought about how close they'd come to losing the ordinary, the mundane, the beautiful boredom of everyday life. Morning chaos, late-night talks, annoying habits, inside jokes no one else understood. She realized something then, something she wished she'd learned without fear being the teacher. You don't need a crisis to appreciate your life, but sometimes a crisis reminds you to. In the weeks that followed, Kelly spoke more openly, not about medical specifics, but about vulnerability, about the illusion of control, about how even the most polished lives are held together by hope and love and a lot of deep breaths. Viewers wrote letters, parents shared their own stories, strangers thanked her for saying what they were too afraid to say themselves. Kelly read every message she could, and every night before turning off the light, she checked on her kids one more time than necessary, just to be sure, just to breathe, because fear doesn't disappear. It softens, transforms, becomes gratitude if you let it. And in the quiet moments when the house finally slept, Kelly Ripa held on to the simple truth that carried her through the worst night of her life. Love is terrifying, and it is everything.